Welcome to today's lesson, students. So, I'm going to continue with the extra questions related to classification and nomenclature in the lesson World of Life. Extra question 11. Complete the diagram given below about the classification of kingdom Plantae. So, you all know, students, kingdom Plantae comes under domain Eukarya. All are eukaryotic, multicellular organisms. They are all plants. So, they have a cellulose cell wall, they possess chlorophyll, so they do photosynthesis. Those are the features of kingdom Plantae. And we classify them into two main groups based on what? Based on whether they can produce flowers or cannot produce flowers. So the plants that do not produce flowers, those are the non-flowering plants. So here we will have non-flowering plants. Flowering plants. And the plants that produce flowers, those are the flowering plants. Then under non-flowering plants, what do we have? We have the non-flowering seedless plants. Plants that do not produce flowers, they don't produce seeds. And we have non-flowering seeded plants. They don't produce flowers, but they produce seeds that are not covered by a fruit. So, they are naked seeds. That's why we call them as gymnosperms. So, here we will have seedless plants. Seedless plants. And here we will have seeded plants. Then, under flowering plant, how do we classify plants? Based on the number of cotyledons present. If there is only one cotyledon, we call them monocotyledonous plants or monocots. And if there are two cotyledons present, then we call them dicotyledonous or dicotyledonous plants or dicots. So, under flowering plants, we have monocots and dicots. Those are the types of plants. So, you can see, students, we have kingdom Plantae, under that non-flowering plants and flowering plants. Under non-flowering plants, we have non-flowering seedless plants and non-flowering seeded plants. We can just refer to them as seedless plants and seeded plants. Then under flowering plants, we have monocots and dicots. So, I am sure you were able to fill these correctly. With that, I will move on to the next question. Extra question 12. Write 3 features of non-flowering seedless plants. 3 features of non-flowering seedless plants. What are the features, students? So, when they are plants, they will have chlorophyll. So they will all do photosynthesis. So, they are all photoautotrophic plants. Then if you take the non-flowering seedless plants, you all can remember Markantia, Pogonatum, if you consider the Nephrolepis, if you consider those plants. Now Markantia has a thallus structure, whereas Pogonatum is a fern type plant. So in a thallus structure, there is no tissue differentiation. The body is a thalloid body form. Whereas in a fern type, there is tissue differentiation and there are vascular tissues. Then if we look at the other features, these plants live in environment that is very shady, less sunlight and wet environments. They prefer that. And also they can reproduce either asexually or sexually. Although they don't produce flowers and seeds, they can reproduce sexually. Those are the features of non-flowering seedless plants. Out of those, we need to write only 3 features. So, thallus structure, or fern type plants, then another feature, reproduce asexually or sexually. Then we can say live in shady, wet environment with less sunlight. So, thallus structure of fern-type plants reproduce sexually or asexually, live in shady, wet environment with less sunlight. In addition to that, you can also say they are all photoautotrophic organisms. Then, this next part of the question. Write 3 examples of non-flowering seedless plants. Examples: Marchantia, Pogonatum, Selaginella, Nephrolepis, then Drinaria, Acrosticum, Salvinia. All these are examples of non-flowering seedless plants. We need to write only 3. So here I will write Marchantia or Marchantia. We have to underline the name because it's a scientific name. You all know, students, in your textbook it's italicized because it's printed. So handwritten, then we have to underline. Pogonatum. Again, scientific name. And also Selaginella. You can even write Selaginella. You can even write Nephrolepis, Acrosticum, Drinaria, Salvinia. All those are examples. I will move on to the next part. Write 2 examples of non-flowering seed plants. Non-flowering seed plants, what are the examples? Cycas and Pinus. So here, Cycas, that is also a scientific name, and Pinus. So both are non-flowering seed plants. I am sure you all answered these parts correctly. With that, I will move on to the next question, extra question 13. What are flowering plants? Plants that can produce flowers. So here we can say plants that produce flowers. Produce flowers. The next question. What is the sexual reproductive structure of angiosperms? Angiosperms is another name given for flowering plants. Why? They have a seed covered by fruit. Covered seed plants. So, what is the sexual reproductive structure of angiosperm? That is the flower. Flower. The next question. Why are flowering plants known as angiosperms? I have already given the answer. They produce seeds covered by fruits. So here we can say they produce seeds from flowers that are covered by fruits. So, seeds covered by fruits is known as angiosperms. The last part. Write another name for angiosperms not mentioned above. I mentioned this before. They are known as covered seed plants. So, they are called covered seed plants. So, we looked at all the questions. What are flowering plants? Plants that produce flowers. What is the sexual reproductive structure of angiosperm? Flower. Then why are flowering plants known as angiosperms? They produce seeds from flowers that are covered by fruits. And write another name for angiosperms not mentioned above, covered seed plants. I am sure you all have written all these answers correctly, students. I will move on to the next one. Extra question 40. What is the criteria used to divide flowering plants into the 2 main groups? Under flowering plants, we have the monocots and dicots. How are they classified? Based on the number of cotyledons present. So, based on the number of cotyledons present in the seed. So that is the criteria used to classify these organisms. Part 2. Write the two main groups of flowering plants based on the criteria you specified above. So we can call them as monocots if there is only one cotyledon, or we can call them as monocotyledonous plants, or even monocotyledonous plants. Then we have the other one, dicots, that is if there are two cotyledons in the seed. So dicots or dicotyledonous plants. So those are the two questions here. What is the criteria used to divide flowering plants into the two main groups? They are divided based on the number of cotyledons present in the seed. Then we have the second part, write the two main groups of flowering plants based on the criteria you specified above. So monocots or monocotyledonous plants and dicots or dicotyledonous plants. And also you can even refer to them as monocotyledonous plants or dicotyledonous plants. Those are the answers, students. I will move on to the next question, extra question 50. Tabulate the differences between the two groups of plants you mentioned in the previous question. What are the two groups of plants? Monocots and dicots. So I will write the headings here. We have the monocots and dicots. What are the differences, students? If we look at the stem of the plant, or before that, we will start with the number of cotyledons. How many cotyledons are present in the seed? One cotyledon for monocots. So, one cotyledon in seed. Dicots, two cotyledons in seed. Then what is the next characteristic we can consider? We can consider the stem. In monocots, the stem is unbranched. So we can say stem is unbranched. How about the dicot plants? The stem is branched. Stem is branched. Then what can we say? On the stems, branches, there are leaves. If you consider the leaves, leaves have venation. In monocots, there is parallel venation in leaves, and in dicots, there is reticulate venation in leaves. So here, parallel venation in leaves. Here we have reticulate venation in leaves. Then, if we can consider the root system, what is the root system in monocots? It's the fibrous root system, no taproot. So, here there is no taproot, but they have fibrous root system. So, how about the dicots? They have taproot system with lateral roots. Then we have another difference. The flowers, number of petals in the flowers. Monocots have trimerous flowers. Trimerous flowers. Dicots, tetramerous or pentamerous flowers. 4 petals, 5 petals or multiples of 4 or 5 petals. So, tetramerous or pentamerous. Flowers. Tetramerous or pentamerous flowers. We have one more difference. What is it? If you consider the stem, the diameter of the stem is even in monocots, whereas in dicots, it's broader at the base and thin towards the tip. So that is also another difference. So here we can say diameter of the stem is even. But here stem is broad at the base and thin towards the tip. So those are the differences. We have the monocots and the dicots. So monocots 1 cotyledon in seed, dicots 2 cotyledons in seed. Monocot stem is unbranched, dicot stem is branched. Parallel venation in leaves, that is for monocots, reticulate venation in leaves for dicots. Then no taproot, fibrous root system is present in monocots. Dicots have a taproot system with lateral roots. And monocots have trimerous flowers, whereas dicots have tetra or pentamerous flowers. Then diameter of the stem is even in monocots, but the stem is broad at the base and thin towards the tip in dicot. So I am sure you all are familiar with all these differences, students. Difference between the features of or groups of plants of monocots and dicots. So with that, students, I will move on to the next question. Extra question 16. What is the kingdom that includes all the animals? You all know that. Kingdom Animalia. So that is Kingdom Animalia. Kingdom Animalia. Then the second question. Why are animals known as heterotrophs? Why are they known as heterotrophs? Because they cannot produce their own food. So here we can say, because animals cannot produce their own food. So why are animals known as heterotrophs? Because animals cannot produce their own food. Those are the answers. The next question, extra question 17. What is the criteria used to divide animals into the 2 main groups? What is the criteria? Presence or absence of vertebral column. If they have a vertebral column, we call them as vertebrates. If they don't have a vertebral column, we call them as invertebrates. So what is the criteria used to divide animals into the 2 main groups? It is the presence or absence of vertebral column. Presence or absence of a vertebral column. Presence or absence of a vertebral column. Then the next part of the question, write the names of the 2 main groups based on the criteria you mentioned above. I told you all invertebrates and vertebrates. So, invertebrates, and vertebrates. So, those are the two groups of organisms. If we look at the two questions again, what is the criteria used to divide animals into the two main groups? Presence or absence of a vertebral column, and write the names of the two main groups based on the criteria you mentioned above, invertebrates and vertebrates. I will move on to the next question. Extra question 18. Write two features of Nidarians. Nidarians, Nidarians or coelenterate. What are the features of coelenterate? They are diploblastic organisms. Why? Because their body is made up of only two germinal layers. Then they are all marine organisms. They have two body forms. One is polyp, that is the sedentary form or the form that is attached to the surface or a substrate, and the medusa form, that is the free-floating form. And they possess a body cavity called the coelenteron. They have nematocyst or nidocyst in order to paralyze their prey and consume them. So, they are all predators. And also, they are radially symmetric. Their body is radial symmetric. Those are the features of Nidarians. We need to write only two features. So, I will say diploblastic organisms, multicellular diploblastic organisms, and also we can say about the coelenteron. Body cavity known as coelenteron is present. So, here I can say multicellular diploblastic animals possess a body cavity called coelenteron. In addition to that, you can write about the polyp and medusa two body forms. You can say about nematocyst or nidocyst, and you can mention about the radial symmetry. You can also say they are all marine organisms. Those are the features of Nidarians. Then we have the second question or second part of the same question. Identify and name the two body forms of Nidarians given below. So, when you look at the two body forms, students, you all can identify them easily. You can see here, this is the body form of a polyp. So, polyp is sedentary. So, you can see this part attached to the surface. Whereas this is a free-floating organism. You can relate this to the animal hydra, and this you can easily relate it to jellyfish. So, you all know this is polyp and this is medusa. So, the two body forms. We have written the two features and we have identified the two body forms. I am sure you also did the same thing. The same way you would have even written other features also, but those are all correct. With that, I will move on to the next one. Extra question 90. Two animals that belong to Nidaria are given below. Write their names. So, here we have two animals. What is this? You all can see that is sea anemone, and this is jellyfish. So, we need to write their names. So, sea anemone and this is jellyfish. So, we have identified both the organisms, the Nidarians. Then we have another question. Write another name of Nidaria. Briefly state the reason for this name. They are called coelenterates. Why? Because their body cavity is known as coelenteron. So, they are known as coelenterates. Rata. Nidaria is known as coelenterata because they possess a body cavity called coelenteron. Then the next question. What are the first organisms to evolve a body cavity called coelom? You all can remember that, students. So, Nidarians or coelentrates, they have the body cavity called coelenteron. After that, it is phylum Annelida. They are triploblastic organisms and they are the first organisms to evolve a body cavity called coelom. And thereafter, mollusks, arthropods and echinodermates, they all possess coelom. So, they are all coelomic organisms. So, what are the first organisms to evolve a body cavity called coelom? They are Annelida. Or we can say annelids because they have asked for the first organisms. Phylum Annelida or annelids. So, I am sure students you are able to answer all these questions correctly. You identified the two animals, sea anemone and jellyfish. Then here write another name for Nidaria, coelenterata, because they possess a body cavity called coelenteron. And the first organism to evolve a body cavity called coelom is annelids. With that, students, I will move on to the next question. Extra question 20. A few statements regarding annelids are given below. Put a tick if the statement is correct and put a wrong if the statement is incorrect. They are unicellular organisms. Annelids. Annelids are all worms, triploblastic, multicellular. So they are, and also you all know because they belong to kingdom Animalia, all the animals are multicellular. So here it says they are unicellular organisms. That is incorrect. Then the second one, they show radial symmetry. Annelid worms, you can remember, nares is somewhat flat. So, it does not have a radial symmetry. Even leech, you can remember, towards the ends, it's somewhat, the diameter is less, but in the middle, it can become more broad, especially when it is moving. So, they are also, that is a worm. Then we have the earthworm. It's more like a flat vermiform body, but it's not radial symmetry. It is bilateral symmetry. So, they show radial symmetry, that is also incorrect. Then we have the third one, they live in moist environments only. Do they live only in moist environments? They on terrestrial environment, land, they do live in moist environment. But you can find them in the marine environment as well. So, marine, terrestrial and freshwater. So, that means this statement is also incorrect. Then we have the fourth one. Their body is segmented only externally. No, they are known as segmented worms. Why? Their body is segmented internally and externally. So, that is also incorrect. They possess a coelom. That of course is correct. Those are the first organisms to evolve a body cavity known as the coelom. So, that is correct. Then we have the last one, they only reproduce asexually. So, that is wrong because they reproduce sexually as well as asexually. So, that is also incorrect. Out of all the statements, they are unicellular organisms, wrong because they are multicellular. They show radial symmetry, that's wrong because it's bilateral symmetry. They live in moist environments only, no, they can live in the marine environment also. Their body is segmented only externally, that is wrong because it's internally and externally segmented. They possess a coelom, that is correct. And also they only reproduce asexually, that is also incorrect because they do asexual reproduction as well. So, those are the statements in extra question 20. These statements are related to annelids, the annelid worms. So, we have answered all the statements there. We have selected as correct or incorrect there. I am sure you also did this correctly. With that, students, I will move on to the next question. Extra question 21. Fill in the blanks of the statements about phylum Mollusca given below. Phylum Mollusca given below. The body is divided into, what are the parts of the body? A muscular foot, visceral mass, and also the head. So they have a head, a muscular foot, only one foot, and visceral mass. So they have a head, muscular foot, and visceral mass, or you can say head, visceral mass, and muscular foot. Then the second statement, soft-bodied animals. So before coming to soft-bodied, they are all multicellular and triploblastic. Multicellular, they are made up of many cells. Triploblastic, because the body is made up of 3 germinal layers. So multicellular, cellular, triploblastic, soft-bodied animals. Those are features of mollusks. So they live in, what are the environments? Terrestrial, freshwater, and marine. So here terrestrial, freshwater, and marine habitats. Then the body is moistened by what? Mucus. Some of them possess an external shell, some of them possess an internal shell. So some of them possess dash and dash shell. So internal and external shells. And the shell is made up of what? It is made up of calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate. You can write it like this, or else you can write calcium carbonate, the chemical formula. Either one is okay. Then symmetrical body. What is the symmetry? They are bilaterally symmetrical body. Bilaterally symmetrical body. And finally, what is the type of reproduction? They show sexual reproduction. They show sexual reproduction. So if we go back to the sentences, the body is divided into head, muscular foot, and visceral mass. It is a multicellular, triploblastic, soft-bodied animals. They live in terrestrial, freshwater, and marine habitats. The body is moistened by mucus. Some of them possess internal and external shells. The shell is made of calcium carbonate, and they are bilaterally symmetrical body, and also they show sexual reproduction. So those are the statements regarding phylum Mollusca. I am sure students, you were all able to answer these correctly. With that, I will move on to the next question. Extra question 22. Write a few examples for soft-bodied animals. Examples for soft-bodied animals, the mollusca, phylum Mollusca. You can write snail, then chiton, slug. We can even write squid. All those are examples of soft-bodied animals. So here, bivalves, even bivalves. So write a few examples. Snail, slug, bivalve. Then there is chiton, snail, slug, bivalve, chiton, squid. So snail, slug, bivalve, chiton, squid, and also octopus. So these are the examples of soft-bodied animals. Then we have the next question. Give examples of arthropods. Arthropods, one of the phylum that contains the or it is the phylum that contains the largest number of species. So you know a lot of species. Crab, prawns, all the insects. So we can say butterfly, mosquito, beetle, bees, wasp, and all those come under arthropods. Even spider, centipede, millipede, scorpion, all of them come under arthropods. So I will write a few examples. Crab, prawn, butterfly, then bees, beetle, wasp, ant, spider, scorpion, millipede, centipede. So these are some examples of arthropods. Crab, prawn, butterfly, bees, beetle, wasp, ant, spider, scorpion, millipede, centipede. So different examples. Then the next question. Write 3 features of arthropods. What are the features of arthropods? Multicellular, triploblastic, coelomic animals. Then they have jointed appendages. That's why they are known as arthropods. Their body is segmented and some of the segments combine and form the functional segments called tagma. And those tagma can be head, thorax and abdomen. And also some of the arthropods possess special structures called wings. And they show sexual dimorphism and they reproduce by sexual reproduction. Those are the features of arthropods. In addition to that, they have a chitinous exoskeleton. That is also a feature of arthropod. So we need to write 3 features. We can say they possess jointed limbs or legs. Then we can say have a chitinous exoskeleton. Some have special structures known as wings. So they have special wings. Why are the wings special? Because the wings are part of the exoskeleton. So these are some features I have already written. They possess jointed limbs, have a chitinous exoskeleton. Some have special structures known as wings, or some have special wings. In addition to that, you can even say multicellular, triploblastic, coelomic organisms. They show sexual dimorphism, they reproduce sexually, and they live in all types of environment. Marine environment, freshwater and terrestrial environment. They are the phylum that possesses the largest number of animals within them. So those are features of arthropods. I am sure you all were also able to answer these questions correctly, students. With that, I will move on to the next slide. Extra question 23. Give examples of echinodermates. Examples of echinodermates. You can remember, students. Starfish, brittle star, sea lily, sea cucumber, sea urchin. So these are examples of echinodermates. Give examples of echinodermates. Starfish, brittle star, sea lily, sea cucumber and sea urchin. Then we have the next part of the question. Write 3 features of echinodermates. What are the features? They are multicellular, triploblastic and coelomic. Their body has pentaradial symmetry. Why? The body is divided into 5 radial arms. So because of that, they show pentaradial symmetry. They have a very highly developed water vascular system, and also they have tube feet for locomotion and respiration. And also they are all marine organisms. So those are marine animals. Those are the features of echinodermates. You only need to write 3 features. I will say they have highly developed water vascular system. Then they show pentaradial symmetry. And also we can say they have tube feet for locomotion and respiration. They have tube feet for locomotion and respiration. In addition to that, you can say multicellular, triploblastic, coelomic organisms. Body is divided into 5 radial arms. All are marine organisms, and also they carry out sexual reproduction. All those are features of echinodermates. So if we look at the questions, give examples of echinodermates: starfish, brittle star, sea lily, sea cucumber, sea urchin. Then write 3 features: highly developed water vascular system, pentaradial symmetry, and they have tube feet for locomotion and respiration. With that, students, I will move on to the next question. Question number 24. Write the relevant vertebrate group that possess the following features. So, if we look at the first set of features, possess a bony or cartilage endoskeleton. Body is covered by scales and streamlined in shape. So, if the body is covered by scales and streamlined in shape, from that you know they are fishes. Only streamlined body is there for only fishes and birds. But in fishes, the whole body is covered by scales. In birds, only the legs have scales. The scales are restricted only to legs. And also having a bony or cartilage endoskeleton, that again is a feature of fishes. Bony fishes, cartilaginous fishes, or chondrichthyes and osteichthyes. Possess fins for swimming and balancing. That again is a feature of fishes. Possess a lateral line system to detect vibrations in water. So all these features correspond to fishes. Then the next one. Dry skin without glands. What are they? Reptilia. We will check. Possess scales on skin. That is also for reptilia. Respiration is done by lungs. That is also there. Then pentadactyl limbs are used for locomotion. They are, of course, students, you all know, again possess scales on skins, and dry skin without glands is for reptilia. Respiration by lungs. Even birds have lungs, mammals have lungs. That's common to many. Pentadactyl limbs for locomotion. That is also common to reptilia, birds and mammals. Carry out internal fertilization. That again is for reptilia. So mainly from these features you can say they are reptiles. So this is reptilia. Then I will move on to the next two. I am sure you were able to identify the two groups correctly. Skin is covered by hairs. Obviously you know, mammals. Animals possess mammary glands, sweat glands and sebaceous glands. That is also specific. You know, mammary glands to nourish their young, sweat glands to produce sweat and sebaceous glands to produce sebum to keep the skin somewhat oily. Not very oily, to maintain the oiliness. They have ears with pinnae, external pinnae or external earlobe, biconcave red blood cells lacking a nucleus, a characteristic of mammals, complete double circulation, possess a placenta and embryonic membrane for the development of the fetus. So, all these are characteristic for mammalia. Mammalia. Then we have the fourth one. Water is essential to complete the life cycle. That shows metamorphosis. So, life cycle with metamorphosis, and they need water to complete their life cycle. You know immediately amphibia. Let's look at the other features. Have thin mucous skin without scales. That is also a feature of amphibia. Respiration is done by lungs, moist skin and buccal cavity. Only group of organisms with more than one respiratory organs. So, they are amphibians. Amphibia. And the last one. Possess a light bony endoskeleton. So, when you say light bony endoskeleton, you know that's for birds because they need to fly. The body weight has to be less. Body has a streamlined body shape. So, I told you all fishes and birds have streamlined body shape, but here you can understand it's for birds. Skin is covered by feathers. So, that is a characteristic feature. This one. Scales are present only in legs. Again, fishes have scales, reptiles have scales and birds have scales, but birds have scales only on legs. Warm-blooded animals that possess a beak. So, warm-blooded, both mammals and birds, they are warm-blooded animals. But here, warm-blooded animals that possess a beak. Beak again is a special characteristic for birds. So, what is the group? Aves. So, here it is going to be aves. I'm sure you would have recalled all the characteristic features or features of these vertebrate groups. So, with that, I will move on to the next question. Extra question 25. Write examples for phylum Annelida. Phylum Annelida, they are all segmented worms. What are the examples? Earthworm, leech and nereis. So, here examples for phylum Annelida, earthworm, leech and nereis. Nereis, you all know, is a scientific name, so we need to underline the answer. So, extra question 25, write examples for phylum Annelida, earthworm, leech and nereis. So, with that, students, I have completed 25 extra questions. I am going to end this chapter, and in the next chapter also, I will discuss some more extra questions.